good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see you all on this beautiful Thursday. The action of the past couple of weeks has all been over in the Indiana Senate. The House, in part of a troubling pattern, has sort of degraded into a guns and abortion debating society, intertwined with some banalities, some vapid bills attached to particular bill numbers, but we've become somewhat accustomed to that. There have been some important events, however, over in the Indiana Senate, which have implications for the House and the General Assembly as a whole, and the state as a whole. First I want to remark on is the roads bill, where many of us eagerly awaited to witness Senator Kenley's flourishes and brushstrokes that he planned to put upon House Bill 1002. I suspect that many believed he was going to rewrite the bill, but he substantially worked with what the House Republicans sent to him. And he found a way to make it worse. And I did, certainly, that was noteworthy, but it appears to me like he's planning to make the House leadership eat the bill that they sent over. He removed the most popular provision of the roads plan, which was to take the state sales tax on gasoline and allocate it where it belongs, which is to Indiana's roads and bridges. He added in a very unsavory $5 a head fee on new tires. I don't know a Hoosier, including myself, that doesn't dislike having to go buy a new tire. Usually the salesperson will suggest a couple of additional fees on top of the cheapest tire that you can possibly get at the place, which is going to run you 80 or 90 bucks, and then you'll have that annoying state fee announced to you when you're finishing up your purchase. Those are the types of things that make me wonder how much negotiating room there's going to be between the two houses, because certainly he actually became a little bit more onerous when it came to fees and taxes and tolls, even than what the House of Representatives had. So it's going to make for an interesting conference committee time. As always, my hope is that they find some balance and something that brings forth a tangible and worthwhile reinvestment in Indiana's infrastructure, but one that's applied fairly and reasonably and that the people can understand. I think we're still a long way from that point. I also wanted to say something important, and this is complimentary to Senator Kenley, about the Indiana state budget proposal that's over in the Senate right now. Something that House Democrats have cried out for some time now is to separate school funding into its component parts. That would mean separate line items for traditional public schools, for charter schools, for voucher schools, and your virtual charters. The reason for doing that is just so we can track how much money we're actually spending and then tie it directly to performance and make better public policy decisions. As happens so often in the minority, you have to say an idea repeatedly and then it works its way into the consciousness of our friends across the aisle, and it seems that one has started to work its way into the synapses of some of our Republican colleagues, because Senator Kenley wants to separate out the voucher funding. I think that is a good idea and a good step in the right direction. So while I'm a little bit puzzled by what he did on the roads bill, I have my theories, but we'll learn whether they're right or wrong when we get to the end. We certainly have some positive developments in that direction. Again, there aren't major questions about the overall level of school funding, but there are questions about how the dollars are being used and are we appropriately accounting for them. Beyond that, we have, it's been, as I said at the beginning of my comments, a little bit troubling. I know the Speaker began the session with the best of intentions of avoiding some of the divisive social issues. I think his hands may be tied on some of that because some members of his caucus demand otherwise. But there's a lot of important public policy matters, and every time we have, some more of what we've seen on the floor the past couple of weeks, it makes it harder for the majority caucus to govern on many more important things within the public attention. So we're we're getting to the end here. I'm very much looking forward to it, and hopefully we can wrap up this very dirge-like march on Senate bills and start the real work in conference time. With that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
So, Scott, where's your caucus? What have the discussions been on the whole Brickers situation? Obviously, this tends to be not necessarily a Republican or Democrat issue,
Right.
more just sort of philosophical and where people come from.
Yeah, Abdul, I appreciate you asking me that. Alcohol issues are fascinating because they cut right across the aisle, and there's people that agree on 99% of other issues. When it comes to alcohol regulation, they have completely different points of view. One thing I will point out, we've had over a decade now of alcohol regulation under Republican administrations. We have had, Republican leadership in the legislature sort of steering the alcohol policy. So they're going to have to use that leadership role to help undo some of this mess. I would never sit here and pretend to have the only solutions to that, but we do have a careful three-tiered system of alcohol regulation. We need to do our best within certain, right and left limits to try to preserve reasonable regulation. It doesn't appear that the proprietors went out of their way to do anything wrong. It sounds like they followed the procedure, but certainly it does open the door to outcomes that I think weren't necessarily intended here. So I have my mind open to various outcomes. I'm looking to hear what even the speaker might suggest on that. I'd be eager
It sounds
to hear
like
some
you're
specifics.
saying that this is not my problem.
I'm not exact. It's all of our problems. We're all affected by the benefits and ills of alcoholic beverages. I think we all agree that we don't just want to let people go back to moonshining and say, have at it, go sell your product. That's not what we have here. But it will entail the committees and possibly committees over the summertime looking very closely at the public policy implications, and are we doing what we meant to do? I'm not sure that we are.
On the Senate's move to put the vouchers in a separate line item, Speaker Bossman talking about that said he is not, of course, a fan of doing that because I believe he, as he put it, he thinks the goal there is to separate it out and then put the screws to them. Is that part of? But is that part of your caucus, and you are not a fan of the school vouchers? Would putting in a separate line item make it easier for you to?
It's more than that. I think in this state we've gotten past debating some of the philosophical differences. We do have those differences and we express them, but it's really about the cost now. We have a new significant government program, and it has to be monitored carefully, just like all the rest. And we have to be able to witness where the growth is. Right now, we just don't know. And have made careful spending decisions for years when it came to traditional public schools. That same watchfulness over the taxpayer dime is going to have to be applied to any expenditure, whether it be for voucher or not. I really just think it makes common sense. I've had a lot of experience discussing this issue. You go into a room full of citizens, and a lot of heads start bobbing up and down on that one. That's not something they should be fearful of. As a matter of fact, it's maybe a chance to tell their story a little bit more effectively.
Correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think you were also not a fan of the cigarette tax increase. If you want the shift of the sales tax back in, how do you make up for that in the budget itself?
Well, this is Eric, you came at it from a little different direction than which I intend to answer it. But the concern about the cigarette tax increase is with matters unrelated to this chamber in this state. We have to be planning for healthcare out in Washington. Now, we saw the 17-day Hindenburg fiasco of the American Health Care Act. But Paul Ryan is already saying that he was looking for a plan B and how to revive that. We just don't know what the future of HIP 2.0 is in Indiana. And we don't know what, we've seen the immediate course of action, but we don't know what the longer term prospects are for the healthcare expansion that we had and in Medicaid. My point about the cigarette tax is that if you're going to do it, it needs to be reserved for healthcare expenditures because there's just too much uncertainty in Washington right now.
So on road funding, so far we've seen it, it's the House Republicans' bill versus the Senate Republicans' bill, which there are obviously some significant differences in, even if they aren't as significant as you were hoping. But what's your sense of what Governor Holcomb, the role he's playing in this debate, and how much do you think him coming out and starting to talk about specifics and what he'd like to see, how much do you think that will change the debate?
I think, as I said earlier, I don't have a problem with the way the governor's handled it up to this point. I mean, I think he understands that you have to let these folks work. And you've got to get closer to conference committee time when you sort of are able to visualize what is politically achievable between the two chambers, and then you start interjecting on some of the policy specifics. Having said that, the time is nearing when he's going to have to offer his opinion about this provision being bad and this one being unworkable and this one sounding pretty good. We're getting there, and I don't know what the relationship at the upper echelons is like between the two chambers right now. I hear rumors. I don't believe all of them. They've demonstrated they have the capacity to work together in the past. But I think it was noteworthy given some of the consternation I've heard expressed in very conservative circles that in many ways the Kenley bill went to the left of the House bill. I didn't necessarily expect that, although when you look retrospectively, you, I suppose, think that could be within the realm of the possible. But I don't know, given what's been laid out from the Senate side, I don't know if you're going to be able to make the House bill fairer and more conservative and more reasonable. We'll find they may get there, but that may take the governor to get them there.
You previously made the case that the governor had an obligation to sell these tax increases. He hasn't done that for, last 4 months now.
Right. You know what? I think if you're going to do the substantial tax increases, the moment is going to come where he's going to have to say, yes, this is what we need to do. I think by putting out the myriad of options that he was willing to accept, he sort of minimally met that expectation. But given sort of the grave differences in opinion within his own party, I haven't necessarily faulted him for trying to better understand what his own Republican members are willing to vote for. So, but he has expressed a willingness to make a major investment in Indiana's roads and bridges. I think he's done that. I think he did that right after he got sworn in. I think he did that in his State of the State. He'd hardly be the first governor to not drill down into the specifics until the very end. But like I just told Brandon, I think that hour is nearing.
Scott, on those social issues, how would you say? Is it fair to say Republicans have really focused on them? Because if you look at where most of them have ended up, the school prayer bill kind of in limbo, the abortion reversal bill. Like the not going to see light of day, some of the gun bills have gone off to study committees. So has there really been a focus on social issues, or what they've handled just Indiana being, Indiana?
Yeah, that's a fair question, Abdul. Usually what you've seen here is see a very radical proposal put forward. They go to caucus and they get all tied up in knots internally, and then they start to back off on it. Unfortunately for the rest of us, it doesn't happen in time to avoid putting it on the calendar. So the rest of the state sort of gets dragged through this debate as well, and you get all the emails and all the upset folks. I really wish they could sort of do that maybe in the summer and hash those things out before they got here and all sort of stood around and looked at each other and said, yeah, I want to do another one of those bills. They just seem to take on their own life.
Sorry, Dr. Redondi.
Oh, yes, sir.
I want to go back to my question as I originally framed it. If the best part of the road funding bill is the shift of the sales tax, then what's the appropriate way to make up that money in the general fund budget?
Well, okay, you are, there's an assumption in your question, and I don't know if you meant to make the assumption, but I will tell you, the people of Indiana have asked, if you're going to make a major investment in roads and bridges, why are you coming and taking our money when you have the surplus? So, I mean, when I say, it's a good question, Eric, I just don't accept the underlying assumption that you need to make up for all those funds with a new tax increase. The question is, but I come back to the extent that there's new cigarette tax revenues, the appropriate use of them is for planning for major changes in healthcare down the road. So, I mean, I've always said from the beginning, I think some of the surplus should be used for roads and bridges. I think that's A-okay. I don't have a problem defending that or announcing it.